Merry Christmas morning to you all, guys and geigers, and welcome to the next episode of the Monsters and Manga series, where I introduce the second thesis of Jeffrey Jerome Cohen's essay, Monster Culture, 7 Theses. And the second thesis is one of my favorites. It's the monster always escapes. And the reason I find this one so interesting is because it has a lot of room for extension. So first I'll give you what JJC says about this thesis. He says, the undead returns in slightly different clothing, each time to be read against a contemporary social movements or a specific determining event. And just what that means is that very similar or the same kind of monster will return again and again throughout time and space, but the function might change according to the circumstances of that time and place. And that we kind of touched on the last thesis when I showed you how the mermaid kind of swims along, but in different times and places becomes a different thing. But a monster as useful as the mermaid never goes away. Now, I think we can say that another good example of this is the vampire, and not just any vampire, Count Dracula. So Count Dracula was based on a historical figure, so that gives it some, I guess, weight, so that it, can continue to exist. It has to have enough substance, right, for it to take on all this cultural weight and all this meaning, that it has to carry all this cultural baggage. So it has to have something there at the beginning, I think, a monster for it to want to, keep being used, keep appearing in media throughout time. The big entrance of, marrying Vlad Tepes to culture was, of course, Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, published in 1897. When you say 1897, it's really not as far back as you think, like 1897, the comic strips were just coming out. So it wasn't long before the comic strip got its form that we recognize today. So, it's not all that long ago. But if you look at all the different representations of our friend Count Dracula, you can see that it's not all the same. So, for example, in 1922, you have Nosferatu, which this Count Orlok, I think it's not Orloff. I think it's Orlok. Yeah, Count Orlok. Count Orloff. What's that from? Oh yeah, a series of unfortunate events. Count Orlok here. He is basically, it's Dracula with the name changed, and he was, according to a book by W. Scott Poole, basically that this particular vampire was used in Murnau's German film to represent like these terrible social conditions, this cloud of oppression, like post World War I, that was kind of floating over Europe after World War I. Then you have you've got 1931's Universal monster hit, if I could say that, with Dracula there. Bela Lugosi reprising a stage role. And if you watch it, and it's really good, if you watch it, it does look like it's made for the stage. It wasn't a lot of change, but like this was such a hit that they decided to run with it. And that's why you have a whole bunch of Universal monsters. It's too bad that Universal wasn't able to recapture that when they screwed it up with The Mummy. They shouldn't have stopped just because of that one flop. But anyway, I digress. And so on and so forth. You have John Carradine there in 1945, but the 1931 Dracula is like, it's, I think, more of course it's closer to the book. You have this foreign dude coming in and like sexually manipulating women, and this was a fear, and I think it's mentioned in other books, like this kind of fear in the monster, like they tend to combine different things. They'll divine foreignness and sexual predator, sexual threat. These two fears will combine together to make an even stronger whammy. But there's a bunch of reasons why the book was a hit at that time. Because the monster gave women an excuse to act with abandon, because they're being controlled. So they can be slutty because it's not their fault, so this kind of thing. But you can see how, even though it's the same character, definitely Dracula does not look the same. Chris, you've got, okay, like John Carradine, which is very, very difficult to recognize, and he's been made up very dark. You've got Christopher Lee, who he was a great Dracula. The first movie was really good, and there was a bunch of crap ones. There's one with like Satanists that is just, it's insane. But no matter, whenever he comes on screen, he just commands the whole screen. 1967's Mad Monster Party. Oh, I loved this when they showed it on Halloween at my school when I was in elementary school. That was great. Except now, like years later on a rewatch, there's a actress, she was a TV personality, popular at the time, Phyllis Diller, and she just chews up her character. Just, I don't know, I think it really takes away from the whole thing. Her character is very grating to me, but the animation is, and the character design, which is, this is Jack Davis from Mad Magazine, who did the character designs on this stop motion masterpiece. And then you have Jack Palance, which I'd never seen that one, but then let's jump to, all of a sudden they're bringing back The Sexy with Frank Langella in the 1979 one. And now this is the one that I saw, and I was like, oh, that's it. I've got to be Dracula for Halloween, because this guy is sexy. So, and I think they kind of went with that for a while with a bunch of different versions. But the 1992 Dracula, they like to go back to the source. And so they made this big, they made a big deal about like showing how actually old, and and this comes back to the point, is that vampire always comes back, and like even the Christopher Lee movies, it was a series. Dracula Returns, many times for many reasons. And usually it's just like, oops, knocked that steak out of his chest. Hey, who's this guy? Why are all his clothes intact? Who knows? So that kind of thing is I think very fascinating. I think part of it is that some monsters lend themselves to be to adaptation, to evolution, and one of those monsters happens to be the Oni. We will talk about that when we focus on the two comics, Kimetsu no Yaiba and Promised Neverland. But the point is that like monsters always, if a monster is really resonates with people, you're going to get a sequel. It's a given in horror these days. You're just going to get a sequel, a prequel, a reboot, a re-reboot. It's just going to go on. And sometimes, there's new areas to explore. They still find new areas to explore with these, and I think that's a good thing. And I think that's what those two comics do, is they found new ways to bring life to the Oni. So within the movies, of course, they want to kill Dracula, but like his influence remains, right? Like the damage that he's done, he's created other vampires. They're in some, it depends on the lore that they're basing it on. Sometimes if you kill the big daddy, everybody else, bam, back to normal. Oops, I shouldn't have staked that one guy because darn, he could have come back to normal. But a lot of times it's not enough. You still have to. And vampirism itself, when it's treated like a virus, like Stephen King does in Salem's Lot, where it's just spreading, and that's basically the point. This is another indication of something that just won't go away no matter how hard you try. I mean, a lot of horror movies are about reestablishing the status quo. The monster comes, in other words, and the monster is always a representation of some problem in society. Monster comes, they destroy it, thus establishing normalcy, the status quo. These were fun back when I was a kid, but now I find them really the most boring ones, when everything's like, it's all flowers again. And so I like when horror movies leave that little, but is it at the end? I like that because it kind of recognizes that some problems, like the root of the problem, hasn't been dealt with. And this is my extension. The root of the problem hasn't been dealt with. And so some monsters never go away because you're not dealing with the cause, you're only dealing with the symptom. And that's not going to solve the problem. And so the monster will keep showing up. But when you have a highly flexible monster like zombies or vampires or Oni or, mermaids, then they're going to keep showing up because they've been used to represent a different problem. And so that's what makes them so durable. They're just this canvas, this malleable canvas that you can, like Play-Doh, you can just keep putting your cultural baggage on it. I think also you can look at the monster, but this comes up later in a later thesis, but it's like it's a part of you. So even though you get rid of it, it's still there. The scars are still there anyway, even if you get rid of the monster itself. All the slasher guys, they basically were, like, since, and I was just listening to a podcast yesterday, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In the end of that, the bad guy, Leatherface, he's still alive. I mean, the final girl gets away, very broken, but she gets away. And Leatherface, oh, I'm spoiling this, aren't I? Spoiler alert. Leatherface gets away. He's fine. He's mad. He's swinging his chainsaw around. He's mad, but he gets away. And this kind of establishes the pattern of, like the bad guy getting away, coming back in the next movie. So marketability, right? The money factor also is what keeps monsters coming back. But so I hope you enjoyed this. It got long because I really love this thesis. I love putting it together. And I hope to see you in the next one. Have a merry, 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 and happy holidays, whichever holiday you celebrate. I celebrate them all. Why not? And see you in the funny papers.